Mystical experience number 4. I was in parochial school, and because I was raised by Irish Catholics on both sides in my family, and I was in parochial school. I was on the playground in parochial school, first grade, and I was talking to Jesus and an angel. Fortunately, in the Catholic Church, you're allowed to talk to archangels, and you're supposed to have a guardian angel, and so there's not a taboo against that in any way, shape, and form. And that was very real to me. It was very right there, and I figured, hey, let's talk to Jesus, let's talk to the Virgin Mary, let's talk to Mary Magdalene. Why not? I believed that even as a child at 6 years old, that those experiences and those connections were right there for us should we be open enough to be able to dial into that harmony or that frequency or that resonance that is that being of light, that enlightened being, that soul essence. And I believe that even to this day. I believe that if you call in Buddha and ask for the wisdom of Buddha, you will get answers. I believe if you call in Jesus to help you when you're suffering, you will get help. I believe all of those tools are available to you at any point in time. I think sometimes knowing how to step out of your I self and be open to this altered frequency, breath, and movement is where it becomes challenging and interesting. So once again, we are talking about mystical experiences and the connection of breath to those mystical experiences. I was on the playground. I was talking to Jesus, and he said, come into the church and come into the church, and actually I want to show you something in the church. So this was around the time of Easter, and so we had all the Easter candle that's in the center. Now, in the old days in the Catholic Church, it was a big taboo to not get on the altar. You're not supposed to go up to the altar, especially if you were a child. I somehow, I say this because I don't actually remember how this happened, but somehow I lit every candle in the church. I don't know how I did that, but I did. And in the Catholic Church, there's a lot. In this particular Catholic Church, there were a lot of candles all over the place. And I lit every candle because he said he wanted to teach me about the candles and man and the light. So I lit every candle, and he had asked me to light all the candles. So I lit the big Easter candle, which was, again, a huge, big taboo no-no. And I was sitting there, and I brought all the candles in, and I had them all on the altar. And of course, I could have set a fire. Thank God I didn't do that. But he was giving me this beautiful teaching. And he was instructing me, as he was teaching me, to breathe. And he said, keep breathing. He says, breathe like the flame of the candle. So breathe like the flame is breathing. So it felt like the candle would rise up and I would breathe, and then the candle would go down and I would breathe out. And so I was breathing with the candle. I was becoming one with the candle. Now you have to remember that this is a teaching that I was given when I was 6 years old. So it's based on a 6-year-old mentality and a 6-year-old's understanding of light and awareness. So he said, you are the candle. Your body is the candle. And when it's lit by the Spirit of God, it basically will burn through the body. It'll melt the candle. And that body will die. That candle will diminish, become small. But what happened to the wax? That wax becomes these little tiny particles that go up, 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 up. They go up into the bigger light, and they become one with the bigger light. But each little individual particle that is that wax still retains the knowingness that it was the candle. And so there's billions of you that are connected to the one, and you lose this sense of I, this selfishness, this sense of I. So I'm breathing with this whole teaching, feeling like I am lit by the fire of spirit, and I am the wax. I am this dense thing that I will die, and death was going to be totally okay. It was going to be totally fine because I was still going to exist. I was never not going to exist. I was just going to, all the pieces were going to fall into the air and go up into the light and go higher and higher and higher. And yet I would still retain a sense of self and a sense of myself in this time, in this moment. Again, notice the connection of the breath, the teaching, the light, and that teaching stays with me to this day. However, as with all very powerful spiritual experiences, there's oftentimes ego and darkness that will try and come in and move you off of it. So in that moment, the nuns came in. I can still hear their heavy shoes and their rosaries around their waist, and them clomping down, being super upset. They picked me up on either side, dragged me off the altar, took me to the Mother Superior's office, and I'm sitting there, and on the wall are paddles that are in the size of different children's bottoms. And I am so frightened because I feel like I've done something wrong, but I don't know what I've done wrong. I didn't feel like I had done anything wrong. And I remember hearing Jesus say, "Go with them, but do not believe them." And he just kept repeating that. Go with them, but do not believe them. So the nuns go in, talk to the Mother Superior. They come out, they drag me in. I'm sitting in this big winged back leather chair, terrified out of my mind. And she says, "What happened?" So I told her the truth. I said, Jesus told me to come in to light the candles, and he gave me this beautiful teaching. I told her what the teaching was. And she said, "You are a lying, blasphemous child, and no one sees Jesus until the second coming." And once again, I realized adults have lost touch with the divine. You cannot trust an adult to have a solid connection, that somehow in this density they have been jaded and they have been diminished and they have lost that connection to the divine. And because of that, they were actually dangerous. That was the decision I actually decided when I was a child, that many years later I had to undo that decision, because I decided that you should never tell an adult what you know or what you see, because they will try to diminish it and they will try to diminish you. And I had a moment where I had to decide between believing in someone's words that was in a position of authority or believing myself. I hear over and over again how many people also have had that same decision and choice at some point, and they chose to believe someone's words, even though their words and their actions were not congruent. Fortunately, in that moment, for whatever reason, I'm so grateful, I chose to believe myself over the words of a person who had been spiritually practicing their whole entire life. I trusted my experience that I actually did talk to Jesus, and there was this beautiful thing, and there wasn't anything bad about it, and it wasn't evil, and it wasn't wrong, and that I hadn't done anything wrong, and I had done this beautiful thing, and I was not going to let her take this beautiful teaching from me. And I hung on to it, and I kept remembering him say over and over again in my head, "Go with them, but do not believe them. Go with them, but do not believe them." I just want to add, at this particular time in the world, I think it's very important for you to look at where you believe other people's words and you do not believe your own experience of those words. And when you do that, you perpetuate the suffering on this planet. And I remember sitting in that chair, breathing, on the verge of crying. And the more I breathed, the lighter I felt. The more I breathed, the darker she became. The more I breathed, the more I realized that I was standing in truth and she was standing in fear. And that was so powerful to me, that she was hanging on to these tools. She was hanging on to these traditions. She was hanging on to these rules in order to feel safe. But that's not how you feel safe. That you feel safe by opening your heart, opening to experiences, allowing the experiences in. So, of course, I had to clean the halls and everything for like a month to pay for all the candles. And she called my mother, and my mother had to come get me. And my mother was like, "What happened?" And I told her the truth. I told her the truth too, and she thought it was beautiful. Fortunately, she thought it was beautiful, and she thought that I was right. She says, "You're right. She was wrong. You are actually right. And don't let any adult ever tell you what is true if you know it in your heart. So, breath, mystical experience. The more you breathe, the more light you hold, the more you ground in, the more you center, the more you are at one with everything, and the more the darkness will always reveal itself.